I thought lucid dreaming meant control until the night I killed a man in my dream and he showed up at my door in the real world. Now I'm trapped between waking and nightmare, and the knocking never stops. It started as nothing more than curiosity. I had read an article about lucid dreaming, how the brain can become aware that it's dreaming and take control. It fascinated me, the idea of flying at will, building impossible worlds, or reliving favorite moments. At first, I brushed it off as something only a few people could do, like a rare skill or talent. But the more I read, the more it pulled me in. There were techniques, exercises, even apps designed to help train the mind to recognize dreams. It was a whole subculture of people who claimed they could dream on command, explore their subconscious, and escape reality whenever they wanted. I couldn't stop thinking about it. At the time, I was going through a rough patch. Work felt like a loop I couldn't break. Relationships had grown cold or distant, and the nights seemed longer than they should have. The thought of creating a world where I had control, even just for a few hours while I slept, felt like a gift. So I started trying. Every night before bed, I repeated mantras. I will realize I'm dreaming. I will take control. I kept a dream journal by my bed, scribbling every detail I could remember the moment I woke up. The early days were foggy. Sometimes I'd remember a strange image, a color, or a sound, but nothing clear. Still, I kept going. Then one night, I found myself in my childhood home. I was standing in the kitchen, the lights flickering like bad electricity. Something was off. The smell was right, the layout, even the creak in the floorboards. But the windows looked out onto pitch blackness, like the world outside didn't exist. I remember looking down at my hands, something I'd read in a guide. They were blurred, almost vibrating, and in that instant, I knew. I was dreaming. The feeling was euphoric. It was like realizing you could breathe underwater. Everything responded to my will. I stepped outside and imagined sunlight, and the blackness peeled away to reveal a perfect day. I flew for the first time that night, just lifted off like it was nothing. My heart pounded in my chest, not from fear but from pure excitement. When I woke up, I sat in bed for nearly an hour, just staring at the wall and replaying it all. I finally did it. From there, it became an obsession. I followed strict sleep schedules, did constant reality checks during the day, counting fingers, looking at clocks twice, asking myself if I was awake. I started sleeping earlier, cutting caffeine, and isolating myself from distractions. All I wanted was to get better at it. Each dream became more vivid, more responsive. I created places from memory, then began to imagine things that had never existed. Glowing forests, cities floating in the sky, underwater glass temples. I met people too, dream characters. Some felt real, others like figments. They spoke, laughed, asked me questions. At times they seemed aware that they were part of something unreal. I remember the thrill of meeting someone who remembered me from previous dreams. Her name was Isla. Whether my mind created her or she came from some deeper place, I never figured out. But she warned me once, told me not to dig too deep. I laughed it off. She was part of my mind, wasn't she? She didn't say anything else. After that, lucid dreaming became my escape. It gave me something waking life never could. Control, beauty, meaning. But with every perfect night, something began to change. The colors in the dreams grew a little darker. Some buildings appeared decayed. Faces turned away from me. And then one night, I saw him. A man standing at the end of a long hallway, motionless, watching. I didn't recognize him. He didn't belong there. He first appeared in a dream that was otherwise unremarkable. I was in a vast, empty city, skyscrapers reaching into a cloudy sky, streets wide and echoing, not a single car or person in sight. The silence was heavy, almost unnatural. I was aware I was dreaming, fully lucid, so I wasn't afraid. I wandered through the streets, shaping the world around me, watching buildings change as I focused on them. I turned a corner, expecting to see a cafe I'd once visited in Paris. But instead, I saw him. He was standing at the far end of the street, just beyond a broken street lamp, tall, motionless, dressed in a long black coat that swayed lightly in the windless air. I couldn't see his face. It was cast in shadow, though the dream was clear in every other detail. Something about him felt wrong. He didn't move, didn't react, just stood there, watching me. I tried to ignore him, turned the other way, and walked. But no matter how far I went or what scenery I created, I could feel his presence, like a pressure in the back of my mind. I woke up with a strange chill and brushed it off. The next night he was there again. This time I was flying over a glowing ocean, a favorite dream of mine. The water shimmered with blues and golds, and stars sparkled in the waves. But off in the distance, on a narrow strip of beach, I saw the same figure. Still, silent, just watching. I didn't fly closer. I didn't want to. He hadn't done anything. He hadn't spoken. But something in his presence felt invasive, like he was more than just a creation of my subconscious. I began to notice a pattern. He appeared in every dream from that point forward. Sometimes at a distance, standing on a rooftop, across a field, inside a window. Other times, he was closer, a seat behind me on a train, a dark figure at the back of a classroom I built. But he never interacted, never came forward, just watched. His silence began to feel heavier than words. I started waking, up anxious, heart pounding, even though nothing had happened. During the day, his image lingered. I'd see someone across the street and swear it was him. I'd close my eyes and feel like I was being observed. I searched dream forums, lucid dreaming groups, even asked people if they had recurring dream characters. Many said they did. Dream, guides, or shadow people that appeared often. But none of them described anything quite like him. Not with that same unsettling presence. I began to wonder if he was a projection of something inside me. Fear, guilt, unresolved emotion. But even then, I couldn't understand why he never spoke. One night, I tried to confront him. I made myself approach him in the dream. We were in a strange cathedral with walls that seemed to breathe and a ceiling covered in moving eyes. He stood at the center, hands at his sides, coat brushing the marble floor. I walked up to him and asked, "Who are you?" He didn't answer. I stepped closer. "What do you want?" "Nothing." But then, just as I raised my hand to touch his shoulder, he turned and walked away. I tried to follow him, but the dream collapsed into darkness. I woke up gasping, drenched in sweat. After that, his appearances became more intense. He wasn't just watching from a distance anymore. He started showing up sooner in the dream, sometimes right as I became lucid, and always closer than before, at the edge of the room, behind a door. Once, he stood directly in front of a mirror, but his reflection didn't show. That night, I woke up with a nosebleed and the distinct feeling that someone had been standing by my bed. I don't know what made me do it. Maybe it was the build-up of so many nights seeing him there, in every dream, like a stain I couldn't erase. The tension had been growing steadily, a quiet dread curling inside me each time I saw his silhouette appear in the background. It didn't matter where I was, floating cities, desert ruins, or the familiar woods from my childhood. He always found his way in, always closer than before. It was like he was following me from one dream to the next, learning, adapting, waiting for something, and I got tired of it, tired of feeling powerless in a world I was supposed to control. That night, I remember becoming lucid almost immediately. I was in a massive library, endless rows of shelves stretching into darkness, filled with books that whispered when I touched them. I walked slowly, waiting for him to show up, heart pounding, though I knew it was all just a dream. I turned corners, pushed open heavy doors, and finally, in a room lit by flickering candlelight, I saw him. He was standing between two tall shelves, just a few feet away, not at a distance anymore, not a shadow on a rooftop or a blur in the background. He was right there. His head was tilted slightly, as if examining me. The air around him felt thick, like it was resisting movement. I stepped closer, and this time he didn't move, didn't vanish, didn't retreat into the dark like before. He just stared. I asked again, "Who are you?" My voice felt like it echoed and disappeared. No answer. No blink. I looked around and realized the room was now sealed. No doors, no windows, just books that had all gone silent. Something in me snapped. A part of me, overwhelmed with weeks of unease, took over. If I had control in this world, then I could end this. I had to. I turned, imagined a weapon in my hand, and felt cold metal materialize in my grip. A long, rusted pipe, the kind you'd find in a broken-down basement. It was heavy, almost too real. I approached him slowly, expecting him to react, to run, speak, vanish. But he didn't. He stood there, letting me come closer, as if inviting it, as if he knew what I was going to do and wanted it. I raised the pipe, my hands trembling, adrenaline surging through me in a way I had never felt in any dream before. And then I struck. The sound was dull, like hitting a soaked sack of meat. He staggered but didn't scream. I hit him again, harder, and he dropped to his knees, still silent. There was no blood, just a deep crack in his chest, like porcelain shattering. I stood over him, breathless, confused by how real it all felt. The sensation, the resistance, the weight in my hands. It was too vivid. I remember yelling something, demanding he answer me, telling him to leave me alone. But he only looked, up, eyes visible now, black, hollow, endless. And then he whispered something. Just one word. It didn't sound like English. It wasn't a language I recognized, but it lodged itself in my brain like a splinter. The dream fell apart right after that. The walls of the library crumbled into dust, and I felt the floor drop beneath me. I woke up gasping, drenched in cold sweat, my heart racing like I'd run for miles. My hands were clenched into fists, my fingernails digging into my palms. I got up, staggered to the bathroom, and splashed water on my face. But no matter how many times I blinked, I could still see his eyes. That empty stare, that final moment when he looked at me like I'd done exactly what he wanted me to do. The morning after that dream felt different. I couldn't shake the heaviness in my chest, like something had been dislodged but not fully removed. I barely slept the rest of the night. I kept waking up, certain I was hearing footsteps outside, my bedroom door. But each time I checked, there was nothing. Just silence. A thick, unnatural silence that seemed to hum beneath the surface of the air itself. I tried to go about my day as usual, telling myself it was just a dream. Just a dream. But that mantra didn't work like it used to. The first real sign that something was wrong came later that afternoon. I was in the kitchen, scrolling through my phone, when the screen glitched. Not like a normal freeze or a crash, but a flicker. Almost. Like static, followed by a whispering sound that lasted only a second. I paused, staring at the screen, but everything seemed normal again. I thought maybe it was a background app, or just a brief bug. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. That whisper. It felt familiar. Like the same word he had whispered in the dream. I couldn't remember what it sounded like, but the feeling it gave me returned immediately. Cold, unsettling, wrong. Over the next few hours, more glitches started happening. My wall clock skipped ahead by exactly 17 minutes. One moment it was 3:12, and the next it was 3:29, even though only seconds had passed. I reset it, thinking the battery was dying. Then my hallway light began to flicker on and off, randomly, without anyone touching the switch. At first, I thought maybe there was an issue with the wiring, but it didn't feel random. The flickers came in patterns, 3 short, 1 long, 3 short again, like a signal, or worse, a message. I tried to convince myself it was just my nerves, playing tricks on me. But that night, as I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling and listening to the low hum of my fan, I started to notice the shadows were wrong. They moved even when nothing else did. I'd see them shift at the corners of my eyes, only to vanish the moment I looked directly at them. There was a shadow under the door, but it was thicker than it should have been. Denser. It didn't match the light source in the hallway. My skin crawled. I stayed perfectly still, hoping it would pass, hoping I wouldn't hear the creak of floorboards. The dreams didn't come that night. Instead, I floated in a kind of grey void. No visuals, no sense of time, just an overwhelming feeling that something was being kept from me. When I woke up, my pillow was damp. I had nosebleeds as a kid, but it had been years. I went to the bathroom, flipped on the light, and my reflection in the mirror looked wrong. Just slightly off. My eyes were sunken, my skin pale. I looked like someone who hadn't slept in days, even though I'd just woken up. And as I stood there, staring at myself, the lights flickered again. That entire day, every device I used glitched. My phone rang once, but when I answered, there was nothing but low static, followed by the faintest sound of breathing. The call history showed no incoming number. My computer restarted twice without warning. The internet connection dropped and returned on its own. I even noticed that the time on every device in my house was out of sync. Minutes ahead or behind, none of them matched. I tried to reset everything, but the moment I did, the old time returned, like something didn't want to be changed. I began to feel watched, even when the blinds were closed. I stopped using mirrors for a while. Any time I looked too long, I'd get dizzy, like the reflection wasn't copying me correctly. Once, I blinked, and my reflection didn't, just for a split second. I told myself I was imagining it. That stress was catching up with me. But deep down, I couldn't ignore the truth. Something was leaking through, something from the dream, something that wasn't supposed to follow me into the real world. After those first strange glitches and unsettling sensations, I expected the man in my dreams to vanish. I thought that by confronting him, by attacking him in that lucid nightmare, I had banished him back into whatever shadowy corner of my mind he came from, but that wasn't the case. Instead, something far worse happened. The line between the dream world and reality began to blur in ways I couldn't explain. For nights afterward, I searched for him in my dreams, half hoping to see him one last time to confirm that he was gone. But he never appeared again in the familiar places, the empty streets, the vast libraries, the glowing oceans. The absence should have brought relief, but it didn't. Instead, the dreams felt hollow, like a space had been emptied and something darker was lurking just beyond perception. At the same time, signs of him started creeping into my waking life. At first, it was subtle, small things I could easily dismiss. A shadow moving at the edge of my vision when I glanced toward a dark corner. The feeling of cold air brushing past, me in a room where all windows were closed. A faint whisper carried on the wind outside, unintelligible but familiar. I chalked these up to stress or my imagination running wild after so many restless nights. But then I began noticing more direct signs, things that couldn't be ignored. One evening, I found muddy footprints leading up my front porch, though it had been dry and no one should have been there. The prints stopped right at my door as if someone had been standing there for a long time, waiting. There was no sign of anyone when I looked around. The porch light flickered as if someone was approaching, then turned off completely. My phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number that contained only a single character, a black square emoji. I didn't reply. Inside my apartment, objects started to move on their own. A picture frame tilted on the wall, though no breeze could have caused it. Books on my shelf were knocked over in a pattern that looked like deliberate marks, almost like a code. My sleep was invaded by a new terror, dreams where I wasn't in control, where the man was finally stepping out of the shadows and acting. In these dreams, he would approach me silently, never speaking, just staring with those hollow eyes. I would try to run, but my legs felt like they were stuck in quicksand. The world around me would twist and warp, and I'd wake up with my heart pounding, drenched in sweat. More alarming was the change in my waking perception. I started hearing noises when no one else was home. The scrape of shoes on the floor, the soft tap of fingers against glass. At times the knocking began, soft at first, distant, then growing louder and more insistent. I told myself it was the building settling or neighbours, but deep down, I knew it was something else. Something connected to the man I had killed in the dream. Friends and family noticed the change in me too. I grew withdrawn, jumpy, and distracted. They asked if I was okay, if I was getting enough rest. I lied, said I was just tired. The fear of revealing the truth felt too heavy. Who would believe me? Who would believe that a figure from a dream was now haunting my reality? That knocking at the door, the flickering lights, the shadows that moved when no one was there, all of it was proof that I hadn't escaped the nightmare. The nightmare had followed me. One night, the knocking began again. Louder this time. It wasn't a casual tap, but firm, deliberate, as if someone was demanding entry. I froze in bed, unable to move, unable to call out. The knocking echoed through the silence, filling the room with a growing sense of dread. When it finally stopped, the silence that followed was worse than the noise. A heavy, suffocating pause. I waited, heart racing, but no one came inside. No one was there. But I knew he was waiting, watching, patient, because the dream, the man, had crossed the boundary between sleep and waking. And now, he wasn't just a figure in my mind anymore. I still remember the night it all came to a terrifying head. The knocking had started early, just after midnight, echoing through the silence of my apartment like a persistent drumbeat. I tried to ignore it, telling myself it was just some late-night visitor or a prankster, but deep down, I knew it wasn't that simple. The sound wasn't random. It was deliberate, purposeful, and growing more urgent with every passing minute. My pulse quickened, and a cold sweat broke out on my skin. I didn't want to open the door, but at the same time, I felt compelled, like some invisible force was pulling me toward it. As I approached, the knocking stopped suddenly. The silence that followed was heavier than before, thick and suffocating. I reached out my hand, trembling, and grasped the doorknob. The metal was icy cold, far colder than the night air should have made it. I hesitated, every instinct screaming to pull back, but something stronger pushed me forward. I opened the door. There was no one there, just the empty hallway, bathed in the dim yellow glow of the emergency exit lights. No footprints in the dust, no shadow lurking just beyond the doorway. For a moment, I thought maybe it was all in my head. Maybe the stress, the lack of sleep, the terrifying dreams, they were messing with my mind, but then I felt it. A chill that crept up my spine and wrapped around me like cold fingers. From the corner of my eye, I saw movement. A shadow flickered just outside the reach of the hall light. I blinked, but it was gone. I stepped outside to look down the hall, but the corridor stretched on empty and silent. I closed the door and locked it, heart pounding like a drum in my chest. I told myself it was nothing, a trick of the light, my imagination. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. That night, sleep eluded me. Every time I closed my eyes, the man appeared, not just in dreams now, but in the spaces between. Those moments when you drift on the edge of sleep and wakefulness. I saw his face then, clear and horrifying. His eyes were hollow pits, black as night, and his mouth twisted into a cruel smile. He whispered that same word again, the one I couldn't understand but felt everywhere, in the flickering lights, in the tapping on the glass, in the silence. I tried to resist, to block him out, But the boundaries I thought I had drawn between dream and reality were crumbling. The walls around me felt thinner, as if the world was dissolving. I began to see him everywhere, in reflections, in the shadows cast by passing cars, in the corner of my vision as I walked down the street. He was no longer confined to my dreams or my apartment. He had followed me into the waking world, into my life. I reached out for help, but no one believed me. How could I explain that a figure from my nightmares was stalking me? That the line between sleep and reality had blurred so badly, I no longer trusted either. Friends told me to see a doctor, to get rest, to take medication. But nothing helped. The knocking never stopped. The whispers never ceased. And the man, he was patient, relentless. One night, the knocking turned to pounding. I couldn't ignore it any longer. I approached the door, this time determined to face whatever was waiting. But before I could reach it, the lights went out, plunging my apartment into complete darkness. I stood frozen, heart hammering, waiting for the next sound. And then the whispering began, soft, sibilant, all around me. It was the word again, repeating, echoing inside my head until I thought I would lose my mind. Then, the darkness shifted. A shape formed in front of me, growing taller, more defined. The man, standing there, silent, but watching. His eyes locked onto mine, and in that moment I understood. The dream was never just a dream, it was a warning, and now there was no way out.